In this tutorial, I'm going to go over how to create a website using Flask with a backend in Python, and we are going to be using the render template function in Flask to help us create a website that is in HTML separate from the Python code. So the first thing that we need to do is create a folder for our program. So in this, I'm going to open so that I can create a new folder. So I'm going to take it, let's put it on my desktop and create a new folder here, and it will be my website. Now this is using Visual Studio Code, but you can use any IDE that you like. I like Visual Studio Code because it allows me to do HTML, Python, CSS, or any type of programming that I want to do all in one place. So here I'm creating my website, and then I'm going to open that directory in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so now I'm in that folder. Once I'm in here, then I need to create a templates folder. When you're using Flask, any HTML code that you have needs to be in a templates folder in order for render template function to access it. So I'm going to use this button here to create another folder called templates. And that's the folder that we're going to be working in today. So when I create the folder, now I can create my main HTML file. So I'm going to call it index.html. So the basics of this, I'm going to start by just creating the main parts of a website, which are the HTML, head, title, and body. So let's go ahead and do that. We need to select doc type HTML, which is going to default to HTML5. Then I start the HTML code here. Then I create the head here, which is where all the stuff we don't see is all in the head. Then I create the title of the page, and I'm going to go ahead and name that now. Let's call it calculating numbers. And then I finish the title, finish the head, and I'm going to create the body. Okay, let's add a bunch of space in here because the body is going to be where the main part of my code is. Okay, so this code is going to be something that calculates numbers in a form. It takes two numbers and then it does some math with them. So let's go ahead and create a form to ask for numbers. I'm going to start by adding a paragraph that says enter your numbers. Very simple there. Then on the next part, I'm going to create a form. So this form is going to have a post method. So it's going to collect information and post it so it can show us information on the next page. So here we have form, method equals post, action equals, and we have that there. Now I'm going to add a bunch of stuff in that form. All right, let's start with one paragraph for an input. So this one is going to be a regular input, so it's going to have input just like that. I give it a name so that I can use it in my Python code, and its name is going to be number 1. All right, so that's my first input. Now I'm going to, before I continue, I want to show what this currently looks like when I open this web page. So let's go ahead and say run without debugging. And it's going to ask, I'm going to go ahead and load this in Chrome. And so far, all I have is a website. It says enter your numbers. It has the title calculating numbers that I chose, and I can enter a number right here. Okay, so this is what a basic input looks like. And now that we know that, I'm going to go ahead and close this and start adding some more things to this form. Okay, so let's add another paragraph. P is for paragraph. And then add another input, and this is going to be the second number, because if we're calculating, we need at least 2 numbers. Same thing, but I'm calling this one number 2. It can't have the same number because then when I try to put it in my, or the same name, because then when I try to put it in my Python code, it won't know which one we're talking about. All right. Now I'm going to use a different type of input, which is a radio button, because it's going to allow the user to select which type of operation we want to do. So I'm going to still create a new paragraph, and I'm going to put all of these radio buttons on the same line. So for this one, I'm going to say input name equals, or sorry, not name, that should be type. Okay, because we're choosing the type of input that we want for this one. So input type is going to be radio. Then I need to give it a name equals, and I'm going to call this calc. The name needs to be the same for all the radio buttons, so that way they can work together. And then now I'm going to give it a value, and the value is something that we can take and use in our Python code. So I'm going to call this one addition, and then say add right here. That will be the text that I see next to the radio button, and then that's then my input for this one. Actually, no. Let's go ahead and do this another way. Instead of doing that, let's not put a closing tag there. All right, now we're going to use our second radio button. Before we do that, I just want to show how this looks a little bit different than it did before. So let's run without debugging again. And then you can see here now there's a radio button that I can select. I'm going to add the other radio buttons, and it should change to each one as I click between them. All right, so let's do our second input type equals radio. So same type, same name, different value. This one's going to be subtraction. Okay, and I put the word subtract so it knows that this one is for subtract. I did not want it to change it, but sometimes the computer thinks it's smarter than me. It knows what I want. Okay, now let's do our third one. Same type, same name, different value. Multiply. And then one more for division. You want to go really crazy, you can make another one for modulus, whatever you want to do. Okay, and then divide. Right, so now I have my 4 radio buttons. All of them have to have the same type, and they need to have the same name if I want them to be working together, okay? Otherwise, I won't be able to toggle between the 4. So let's go ahead and run it again so I can see what it looks like. I have add, subtract, multiply, divide, and it's working like it should. It only does one at a time. I can still enter numbers here, but I can't submit them yet. So that will be the next step. I do want to show, so suppose if I wanted to add another question or another radio button, here's what happens if I don't use the same name. So let's say I call this one divide instead of calling it calc, okay? And I'll call it divide 2 so we know what it looks like on the screen. So now when I run this, I can click add, and then I can also click divide because they don't have the same name. So it doesn't know they're a part of the same group of radio buttons. So I would do that if I wanted a second group of radio buttons or something like that. But if I want them all to work together where I can only pick one of them at a time, they all have to have the same name. Okay, so now I'm going to delete this and add my submit button. So I had a lot of space in here. Let's go after this paragraph. We're going to add our submit button. All right, so let's create a new paragraph. And then the input for this one, the type is going to be submit. And I'm going to give this a class name because that's going to make it look however I want it to look for the things in that class, which I will modify later when we do CSS in a different lesson. And then the value is going to be do calculation. This is something that I can use in my Python code. All right, once I did that, then I have the form is completed and we have finished the template for our form. So let's run this to see what the final template looks like right now. So now I have a place where I can enter numbers, I can pick an operation, and then I can press do calculation. Right now, do calculation doesn't do anything because I haven't programmed it to do so. But we're going to go over that in a different tutorial where we show how to use Flask to do the backend programming for this form. All right, thank you, and I will be back with the next lesson.